Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, Homeward on It's All Been Checked Before. Head homeward with us. Become a Patreon member, patreon.com/IABD. And you can get all the bonus stuff, not only for our show, but the mothership. Speaking of Homeward, home. It's all been done Radio Hour. Get sneak previews on all that stuff, get bonus content, get the bloopers, get early insight on all that. It's real easy. It's real inexpensive. Patreon.com/IABD. Now we're going homeward on It's All Been Trekked Before.
We're now doing another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Skeleton Crew's still here.
This is Steven.
Jimmy-Jerome, we're still missing Keith, but he may or may not pop in here at some point and discuss both last week's episode and this. We'll see. Until then, we're talking about Homeward. I don't believe Keith is heading homeward yet, but we'll see. First impressions on Homeward.
Big stars in this episode, or definitely big stars now. Paul Sorvino, Penny Johnson when she was not Penny Gerald Johnson,
And Brian Markinson.
Yeah. Some really good people. Overall, it's definitely a very interesting episode. I don't know if it's a great episode. I can't remember if it's Tor.com or one of those gave it a 1 out of 10. I'm like, no. One of them gave it a C+. I'd probably go more a B-. That's a tiny thing. So I guess that's where I land. But I think the Paul Sorvino moments are cool and the Penny Johnson moments are cool. It's a lot of like, oh, here's another weird pseudo-medieval culture on a planet. There's a lot of prime directive talk. If you're into that, this is very sexy for you. And I think it doesn't get it gets kind of deep into prime directive talk, but also I like that, especially Beverly was the one who's like, I don't know if we're making the right call on this. And, I thought Picard especially was like, no, for a guy who bought it, not the way Kirk does, but a guy who flouts it quite often. Yeah. And I think a lot of that was in service to the episode of where they wanted to go with it. All that said, not a great episode, I don't think. I don't think it was a 1, but like I said, B- maybe.
Yeah, I'm with you. It did not hang the moon. It was fine. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It had some interesting concepts. It did not get as interesting as I thought. Keith R.A. DiCandido, not our Keith, a different Keith, who writes a lot of Trek fiction these days, was a reviewer for Tor.com back when this aired. And I see his rating on Memory Alpha, so I want to read you a bit of it. He gave it a warp factor 1, which is a poor rating.
Yeah.
And he explained, I lost considerable respect for Jean-Luc Picard as a character as he spews tons of self-righteous twaddle in defense of making sure people die the way they were supposed to.
Yeah.
Picard in this episode is compassionless, heartless, and despicable. Point of the Prime Directive to avoid imperialism, to keep it from contaminating, but the equivalent between that level of protection and letting the entire culture die for no good reason that this episode postulates is appalling. And I completely agree.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's where I hit on it too. It's like, wait a minute, buddy. Like I said, you're not James T. Kirk, but you're not exactly. Yeah, and Crusher said it at one point. I can't remember if I wrote it down or not, but she's like, Crusher, her thing was like, can you live with this? Letting these people die, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts. But another overriding thing about the episode, I thought, was that, and maybe this is a credit to Michael Dorn and Paul Sorvino at the end of the day, but I thought, oh, hey, we're going to slam these Foster brothers together, and they're going to keep saying, yeah, that's typical, that's what you would do, but we really never get deeper than that. So we really don't know. We don't know what Nikolai did in the past, really. Yeah, and it's possible I missed it because I watched this very late last night.
We're just told he constantly was causing trouble and made their mother cry.
Right, but we didn't get anything more. And it's like, really? What the?
He was the bad boy and Worf was the upstanding, well-behaved. And he was the biological child of Helena and Sergio.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas Worf was the adopted. What really threw me, I'd never seen this episode. We talked a lot about how I haven't seen a lot of season 7.
Right.
There's 1 or 2 episodes left I know I've seen, but for the most part I haven't seen. What really bothers me is they released some Star Trek young adult novels when I was in middle school. And I loved them and read them over and over and over and over and over again. And the first one was called Worf's First Adventure. The first 3 featured Worf, and then other ones eventually got around to all the next gen crew. They did 3 books for Janeway, and they did 3 books with First one was Spock, second one Spock and McCoy, third one Spock, Kirk, and McCoy. But most of the ones they published were Next Generation. Then there was a whole nother series that were just Jake and Nog hanging around the station as kids. But anyway, so there's like about 30 of the young adults. This book came out before this episode, but after, I think it was last season that they mentioned Worf had an adopted human brother that went to the academy and washed out. So in this book, Worf's adopted human brother plays a major role. His name is Simon, and he is the golden child who's very accomplished, but he just can't cut it at the academy, where Worf is lives in his shadow, but actually succeeds. And so that, to me, I'm like, Nikolai is nothing like Simon. If you look at Memory Alpha, it says Nikolai, also known as Simon. And I'm like, no, that's a completely different character. But I mean, it was our buddy Peter David, even though I just reread this to Zoe. It's not that great a book, unfortunately, despite Peter David being on the cover. I remembered it fondly, but no, it doesn't hold up. But Peter David filled in the gaps, and then Next Gen said, I will fill them in a different way, which bums me out and disappoints me. I guess that's the problem for writing for a show that's still in the air.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So as we begin the episode, we immediately hear about Worf's adopted brother, who we, like I said, we had mentioned before. Thank goodness, because if that came out nowhere in season 7, that would suck.
Yeah.
Dr. Nikolai Rosenko, played by Paul Sorvino, who is best known for Repo, the Genetic Opera, Goodfellas, The Rocketeer, and Nixon, among many, many, many more credits of his 170. I
will try to sprinkle these through, but I have several, or I probably only have a couple. I was hoping to do more Goodfellas quotes. And I said this before, and it applies to last week, Mr. Sloyan from last week, but Sorvino, another great, what my dad would call a great character actor. I mean, he had some leads here and there, and of course his daughter Mira won an Oscar, and we all remember him crying. I think we all remember him crying at the ceremony. But actually, I'm gonna say it anyway. It seems like a good guy. If Paul Sorvino was a bad person in real life, I don't want to hear about it. Don't start a Reddit about it. I don't want to hear about it. But I don't know if this, in some ways, this role is perfect for him, because the kind of the concern he portrays and all that is perfect. See him in I guess it's like seeing your teacher outside of school kind of a thing. Like, what's Paul Sorvino doing here? Which is probably unfair, because he probably did a bunch of sci-fi that I'm forgetting. But it also made me care about the character more, because like I was identifying more with Nikolai than I was with Worf the whole time. I'm like, Worf, what is your problem, buddy? But
so Sorvino was pro-gun and pro-Trump, and was left out of the Oscars in memoriam the year he died, and his widow said, I really hope it wasn't because of his politics.
Oh, man. Well, usually I'm the one spoiling that, but that's a bummer.
Yeah,
maybe he was a good fella.
According to the New York Daily News, Paul Sorvino says Donald Trump is a good guy. Yeah. This was prior to the 2016 election. Let's hope he changed his mind.
And your New York guys maybe knew him that way, but boy.
Yeah. Oops. Sorry. I hope that you see that. Never mind. That was not an article. That was a video. So yeah, he did marry a political strategist. I don't know if she's Republican or not. I'm not going to go further down it.
Well, I will say Mira Sorvino has been affiliated with Amnesty International since 2004, so she did not follow in those footsteps.
Many of us have rejected our parents.
Yes, for sure. So
anyway, Dr. Nikolai Rosenko, we find out that it's a first contact situation, and Nikolai has disguised himself and embedded with the locals, which is not unprecedented in Star Trek, and it will not be the last time we see it. It's a legitimate way to study a population. Sure. Either go in disguise, or they talk about a duck blind, where you just look behind like a one-way mirror above. In fact, they do that's the premise of one of the Next Gen movies, and they even talk about like moving the people with the transporter, and I guess the producers called it the Sorvino swap because of this episode, as they were developing the film. So, of course, the fact that it's widely considered the weakest of the Next Gen films, neither here nor there. But they alter Worf's look to go in there, which is interesting, because we never get to see Worf without the Klingon makeup, but they don't bother to give him a false name.
I wrote, and friends at Passionate So said the same thing, which is essentially, and just to back up, Data first gives us the exposition, as he so often does. I feel like the whole episode, he's always got like, well, here's what the censors say. And then he's like, but in this episode especially, it was like, oh, no, he's like, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the first half hour of this episode or 25 minutes. But then we get into Worf and Worf's like, well, I should go. And I think it's Picard's like, yeah, go by yourself and go get yourself surgically altered. It's like, wait, what? What is going on? And I feel like this whole episode is a lot like maybe a half an hour in. I'm like, man, they were doing a lot for this little group of people that they were like, we don't want to get involved, but man, we're going to change everything on the ship. And I kept thinking, like, is there not another mission they have to do right now other than this?
I didn't have a problem with that. Once Nikolai gets them involved, I feel like they got to do what they can do to carry it out.
Agreed.
And preserve things. But yeah, so Worf beams down and immediately meets Penny Johnson-Gerald, that's the actress's name. The character in this is Dobara. So recognized her immediately. This is her first Trek appearance. Mm-hmm. Penny Johnson-Gerald is best known for Coin 9B24, where she obviously played a big part.
Yeah.
The Larry Sanders Show, which I've never seen.
Yes, I forgot. Yeah.
Absolute Power and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where she will play a character named Cassidy Yates for 15 episodes, starting at the end of season 3. All the way through the end of the series. Yeah, she's one of, when you make the list of DS9 reoccurring characters that matter, and there's a lot of them, she always ranks near the top for me. So she's going to play a huge reoccurring role in DS9 before she goes on to star in the Orville. Yes. And I'm pretty sure that she got the Orville role because of her DS9 role. But
that makes sense.
Star Trek role before DS9.
I enjoy her in everything I've ever seen her in.
We're going to love her in DS9.
I forgot about Larry Sanders. She was so good on there. Yeah.
I really need to watch that. But you're going to love her in DS9. I won't give anything away about her character other than that her name is Cassidy Yates, which I think is an awesome name. I love the name.
That is a good name.
I think it is.
I did write down Nikolai. He's a good fellow. So Nikolai, good fella. Volserino, we're not sure about at this point. But I feel like it's... Yeah.
I can't believe Worf doesn't see that Nikolai's in a relationship with Penny Johnson-Gerald because it's obvious.
Yeah. From the jump. Yeah.
It's like, Worf's like, why are you doing this? I'm like, the woman is being off of him.
And I've often said, like, I'm not the one to comment on this. I was like, wait a minute. The age difference between those two, I think it was 22 years. I looked it up. And again.
Oh, was it?
I'm not throwing stones by any means. I live in a big glass house, so I'm not throwing stones.
And she looks almost the same now, which is probably a testament to how she is aged very much.
My God, yeah.
She's taking care of herself.
And I guess that goes forward even more to like, this is the reason this guy's like, no, I'm good here. Let me take care of these people, and I'm fine staying with them. It's all good. And if I said friend of love, I think that makes complete sense. You're like, yeah, I'll stay in this world.
Yeah. I mean, he shouldn't have allowed himself to get involved, which I think is his character's big flaw. Like, if you're observing and acting like this, falling for one of the natives is a definite no-no, definite, like, crossing of the lines.
Well, and I think that's the overriding question, or at least from the early part of the episode, is like, how did this happen? We know at this point he's in love with her, but it's like, how did you quote unquote, let this happen? Yeah.
The only way I would excuse it is if he actually told her the truth before he got with her, and they did not. I think, and that's my way to fix this episode, the alternate episode. Well, I have an actual alternate episode written down, but what occurs to me right now is if he had actually told her the truth, that does a long way to fixing the problem with their relationship.
Yes, and I think and so what they end up doing later, and I'm sure I haven't known this, but Penny Johnson's the one who convinces Worf, like, hey, by the way, this dude's pretty cool. And if you can, and by the way, you're going to be an uncle. It's like, well, crap. Now what am I supposed to do?
Castle was her other big role. Sorry.
What's that?
Forgot. Castle was her other big role. I was just reading her little bio because she was a lead character in Castle.
I did not know that. Maybe I did and I forgot.
She wasn't in the first 3 seasons, but then she took over as captain, and for the rest of the series, she was like the captain of the police precinct.
Because one of my ex-girlfriends was obsessed with that show and talked about it all the time, and she may have mentioned her. It was a while ago, but
I did watch every episode purely for Nathan Fillion, and it was one of those last procedurals I watched. But she did 93 episodes of Castle. So,
okay, all right,
yeah. Lot of episodes. Anyway, so they go back from Worf's initial beam down, getting the lay of the land, and they beam back aboard so Nikolai can make his request. And they've already surgically unaltered Worf.
Yeah.
I think Nikolai, but I'm like, you're in the middle of the mission. I guess Picard's already has no intention of letting them go back down, so maybe he told them to go ahead and get unaltered. But at the same time, it's like, dude, you leave the surgery until you're done with the mission, right?
Right. Yeah, let's not rush into it. Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's why.
I feel like that was just like, we're used to doing Worf's makeup. We're not going to show him. I don't know. This is what viewers want to see from him.
Yeah.
It's dumb.
It is. Yeah. And maybe that's why Crusher's like, because they have the whole Prime Directive, or one of the many Prime Directive talk, and she's like, somebody's like, well, we really can't do anything. And she's like, she does the rush line. She's like, well, if we choose not to make a choice, we've still made a choice. We said we're gonna let them die. And for an episode that's not a Crusher episode, it's a more of a Worf episode. Crusher is great. I do love, that's an aspect I do love this episode, is like, Crusher's like, Picard should be the one who's like, I'm not sure how I feel about this. But he's like, nope, this is what we got to do. And Crusher's the one who's like, I don't know how I feel about this. You know?
Yeah, this is where I wrote down my alternate episode of Picard could just be reasonable. Like, the fact that he's going to let this planet die is ridiculous. Nikolai's initial plan is not to do this secret holodeck shady stuff. His initial plan is to put a piece of equipment on the surface and hide it and let it save the planet. Yeah. Which seems completely reasonable and a good plan.
Sense. Compared to all the things that the Three's Company kind of things they went through the rest of the episode, that would have been very easy. Yeah, and my other episode.
Why would Starfleet poo-poo that?
Right.
I mean,
they would.
You have to monitor it. You have to make sure the locals don't find it. But I feel like to save a planet, that's worth sending a starship to check on it now and then and keeping an eye on things.
Well, and my other episode is that they all go along with Picard, but then they deal with the ramifications. They're all like Beverly, and they're like, because, I think Picard's even the one who's like, oh, we're playing God here. It's like, yeah, and you're failing. You're doing a terrible job at it. But
he would be very disappointed.
I want him to go. Yeah, exactly. I want him to go through. My own episode is they all live with, we let all these people die. We could have done something and we let them die because of some quaint notion, some kind of, not bureaucratic. Like you said, there is a reason for it. That's not what they're doing. And and regardless, even if they did, even if we were like, even if you and I agreed as the arbiters of, morality and everything in the universe, even if you and I were like, Picard was right. He made the right call. Even then, though, but if they let them die, they still got to live with that. And so I would like the episode, again, that's a very heavy syndicated episode to deal with, but I would have loved to have seen it. Love might be a strong word, but that's my other episode. So.
But it just is not the way we understood the Prime Directive to be or what it's for. I agree with Keith R.A. DiCandido, who I actually really enjoy his Star Trek writing these days, so he clearly understands the franchise. I'm going to blame the writers here. It's based on material by William N. Snape, who also contributes material for a DS9 episode in season 3, and those are his only 2 IMDb credits. Both of those, not even story by, just like contributed story material based on material by. The television story by, in this case, is Spike Steingasser, who is best known for being a writer for this one episode and one episode of DS9. It's a totally different episode than the other guy is contributing to DS9. He contributes a final season. And then teleplay by Naren Shankar, one of our regulars. So a lot of hands, but at the end, Naren should have fixed it. Just saying.
Yeah.
Keith has joined us. Welcome, Mr. Jackson. We are knee deep in this next gen episode. So if you don't mind, we'll keep going on it. You can jump in when it's relevant, and then at the end, we'll come back around and catch up on stuff we missed with you.
These next two could probably go together because these are two. Actually, this is a Goodfellas and a Godfather part 2 line, but it's when Worf is just being a jerk to our friend Nikolai. It's like, now I got to turn my back on you. That's a Seinfeld, not Seinfeld, that's a Goodfellas line that Sorvino says to Henry Hill, played by Ray Liotta, rest in peace. Also, Paul Sorvino, rest in peace, even though you were a Trump supporter. And then it's kind of hand in hand because, again, like I said, a lot of it's like, oh, you're my brother, but you suck or whatever. So the next one is from Godfather Part 2, from Michael to Fredo Corleone. You're nothing to me now. You're not my brother. You're not my friend. So yeah, and again, we hit on this early on, but it's like, I wish we could have give us more juice to care about these two. We care about Worf. Paul Sorvino was a great actor. These guys can carry it. And to that point, when they do get together at the end, I'm like, guys, you guys gave us nothing to support this, but I'm still a little bit moved. I definitely wasn't moved to tears or anything, but it's like, I wish you guys would have supported this a lot more than you did. But these two guys are doing the work for you. But you could have. I'll say it's lazy. It's just lazy to not be like, maybe not lazy or just like, well, we don't want to give anything away. But why not give us details? We need to know why. Otherwise, yeah. And that's why I think the episode ends up just being okay.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't earned, but it still felt nice.
Mm-hmm.
So back to where we've got him starting to be shady and they have the power drain. Why does Picard send around a security squad and not an engineering squad to check out the power drain? Because at that point, they don't know it's like an intruder messing with things.
Yeah.
It did not make sense that it was Worf and not Geordi. It should have been Geordi investigating and then bring Worf back in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like LeVar Burton directed this episode. Alexander Singer did, one of our regulars. So it's not like LeVar Burton wasn't available to do that scene. So when they beam him up, no one noticed? Was everybody asleep? I don't get that. Like, in a group of people, somebody's got insomnia. Somebody's getting up to use the restroom. Somebody notices. If we even had that scene of somebody go, oh, well, must have been a dream or something, would excuse it slightly more than just nobody noticed that they were beamed up.
I don't know. I don't think that. I think it would have to do with if we knew how it felt to be transported.
Beamed.
Yes, beamed or beamered, if you prefer.
Well, and Keith speaks from experience. He literally beamed into this podcast.
Huh.
He does know how it feels. Oh, and I'm glad we got the moon now for you Patreon viewers. The moon, the moon that was not hung in the last 2 weeks. No moons have been hung in the last 2 weeks.
And yeah, Keith has one hanging.
Now I need one for tears, I guess. For
so they go into
tears.
They go into the holodeck where Sorvino's idea, Nikolai's idea, that they're going to travel in the holodeck. And again, we don't want to get into somebody being left behind and the separation and how much space they can be apart in the holodeck. We won't get into that this time.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricky holodeck. But
I like the sign of LaForge as the omen.
That was fun.
Yes, the LaForge omen, which
and Geordi eavesdropping on them.
I mean, Geordi's the dungeon master eventually, right? More or less.
Well, and it's clear Worf knows Geordi's listening and being the dungeon master.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been made clear to the audience yet. So that's kind of a fun little.
Well, and I'll say that, again, that's just a weird aspect of the episode. It was like, hey, Geordi, can you just make this happen for the next several days or whatever? And God bless LeVar Burton. You're like, all right, Geordi, all right, I'll go along with this. But, and he's having to do a lot of soliloquizing of like, I'm talking to myself while I'm dungeon mastering. I'm not really talking to anybody.
You'll get there.
This is the one part where I'm with Picard in this episode when he says, I'm not enthusiastic about it. Which this is the Star Trek ripping off Star Wars part of the podcast. That's essentially, I've got a bad feeling about this.
Well, I don't know. In my opinion, if I may interject now, finally, after weeks of silence.
It's going to be, well, from a certain point of view, is what that's what this part of the episode is.
Sigh. Well, I guess Jimmy didn't really care about this part, so.
You have the high ground now, Keith.
Yeah. I think the more frustrating thing about this for me, I guess the problem we tend to get to when, he's back. When we get to Prime Directive episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed to lean into Picard caring so much about this without, just being a stickler without really considering some other options before It's like, I'm putting my foot down and I'm leaving you with no other recourse. We're done. See ya. And then having to kind of walk some of that back to seem more reasonable once they got to the point where, well, I guess you've already done it and I can't just kill them. So we're going to have to do something. And
but yeah, my note on that is very similar to Picard's reaction, which was prime directive, schmime directive.
but
like,
no, I
well,
mean, it's
what am I going to do now?
right. Well, it's like they needed to give him an out then. And it was a little weak. And that kind of, what was it? Well, I'm not enthusiastic about this. I don't want to weaken my character too much. I'm still not just going to go, okay, whatever, but reluctantly go along with it. That kind of, they set him up to be that kind of figure. So,
and I think that gets to the whole, and again, I did not do enough research on this, but I think that gets to the point of whatever the deal. Maybe it was, we have Paul Sorvino and he being Force brother. And what do we have to do? We got to get these guys together and we're going to do all these weird bending, an elephant's tail hanging onto a dandelion off a cliff thing just to get to this point of the episode. As long as we can get there, we don't care about the rest of it. We'll do what we have to. So there's a lot of gymnastics going on here.
So Crusher was worrying about transporting them because they might not be acclimated to the climate. The climate might be a problem, but she doesn't mention disease,
Right.
You think the germs and
well, and I think
that to me is the bigger concern, especially for that doctor.
It was another one of those things. It's like, and this is a Star Wars thing, even more than, probably more than Star Trek, I think. But, if it's a snow planet, it's a snow planet. The whole planet's snow. And on Star Trek, even when they're M planets, I feel like it's an M planet. People can live there, but it's more like Mars than Earth, which actually I guess makes sense on some level. But yeah, it's a desert planet. Okay, it seems like part of the planet should be colder or warmer than the other parts of the planet. But yeah, especially in a sci-fi show.
So that at this point, we see the historian. This character's name is Vorin, played by Brian Markinson, who's best known for the show Continuum and the movies Shooter, Wolf, and The Curse of the Jade Scorpion to bring Woody Allen into.
Yeah, he was in 3 Woody Allen movies. And he looked very familiar. And then I'm like, okay, yep.
Who was he in Continuum?
Episode of DS9 as well in season 5. Oh, I also see he's in 2 episodes of Voyager. I was checking his Trek bona fides. In Continuum, hang on.
Well, in the meantime, I strongly recommend that series along with Dark Matter, which I keep trying to sell Jimmy on, but they're kind of.
I have 4 episodes left of Continuum to watch, and I've had 4 episodes left for like 8 years. I need to finish it. It's so good. It's
okay.
I barely started the final season of Continuum and have never gone back to it. Anyway, he plays Inspector Jack Dillon, one of the main characters. He was in 38 episodes.
What was Continuum? I feel like I should remember that.
Well, it's a really good Canadian science fiction series where corporations.
It's not really about Canada so much as it is about.
But it's Canadian.
It's definitely Canadian.
Okay.
It's sort of like Time Cop.
Okay. Which I've never seen. So everyone's doing splits. That's what I think of.
Stars Rachel Nichols, who you may remember from the 2009 Star Trek movie where she played the Orion that Kirk hooked up with.
Okay. I was thinking of Rachel Nichols, the former ESPN broadcaster, but either way, it conjures a similar thing in my mind.
Rachel Nichols.
Very attractive woman.
But yeah, it's like a long-term Time Cop, almost a little bit of 12 Monkeys in there too, which I like that series too once I got going on that.
Do you know the
Rachel Nichols
showrunner of
also a very good reporter, but also very attractive. Sorry.
The television creator and showrunner of 12 Monkeys was the showrunner of Star Trek Picard season 3.
Oh.
And he brought a lot of 12 Monkeys influences into the third season of Picard.
You know what? 12 Monkeys is a movie I have not seen that I need to see.
And the series
movie's good. I barely started the series. I need to watch it.
Pitt and Willis, right? Yeah, aren't they both in it?
Yeah, it's a really good movie.
Yeah.
I hear the series is great. What I've seen of it's good, but I've only seen a little bit of it. Yeah.
Also, now while we're on the subject, another I think was a Willis movie, the one with
What you talking about, Willis?
Wrong Willis.
Different Strokes, the movie.
I have his face. The guy from 10 Things I Hate About You. The younger. Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh
yeah,
the one where they were the older version, the younger version.
Yeah.
That was a fun one.
The alien from Third Rock.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to Vorin.
Back to Star Trek.
And I was starting to make a comment about Warren, and then we got sidetracked off it because he's got
Somehow.
some great credits, and it's good to talk about him.
Mm-hmm.
He was writing down history on the scroll while it was still unfolding. He was already documenting the journey before the journey is over. It's a mistake, right? You wait till at least you get to the destination and then document the journey.
I think you want to keep some, sorry.
In the moment.
Yeah, they didn't have like cameras or anything. So it was like he needed to get some of those details while they were still fresh.
It's hard to edit later, though.
No, because the scrolls, it seems like it's a relatively small amount of scrolls to cover a generation's worth of events. This is a huge undertaking and should be documented, but wait till it's over and then figure out what the highlights are. Don't
Did they
document the steps.
Did they call him a chronicler? Is that what he was?
Yeah.
That would make sense.
I will say the explanation that would have fixed this is if he was just doing his first draft and then later he'll go back and but it seemed like he was doing the official record. So that's
I think they probably have a system in place to account for that. I mean, that's still going to be an important document. I mean, they can probably take out pages and put them back in or whatever. Look like a binder sort of.
Yes, but so he talked about being able to carry like the last 7 generations. So it could be that many. And yet you're already writing this down. That bothered me a lot. That took me out of the story.
So he was a chroniclers of the Bolerans.
Sure.
Sorry, that's a SNL reference that I didn't quite nail.
Of course, the door to the holodeck isn't locked, so you can just wander out.
Were we doing like the lazy Sunday thing or?
Lazy Sunday, thank you.
Oh, I love Lazy Sunday. So they'd already established that this holodeck was on deck 10 from an earlier comment in the episode, so I was not surprised when he went to 10 forward because I knew he was on deck 10.
Yeah.
And that was just their excuse to use a set. But these people, Starfleet officers, have been trained to help. I get that. They're trying to help him.
Who are these people?
Why do you crowd him? That's not how you help anybody. You don't just all get in a crowd around him. That's just bad training, and I don't think Starfleet trains that poorly.
Yeah, they're so fascinated by seeing an alien suddenly. They're like, oh my god, what's this? Who's this guy?
I guess it's either way. I guess in my mind, it's like, doesn't everybody on board know there's this guy that they shouldn't be around? But maybe it's like they're not going to tell anybody about this guy. But yeah, to both your points, like their training should be like, this is a weird dude. We should probably stay away from him.
Well, actually, I think you
get him help, but you call Troy, and Troy's already there, so you back off and take her lead on it.
I think you already talked me into the explanation just through that. I mean, I think these are just they would have no reason to think that this person who showed up here was part of whatever expedition is going on in the holosuite unless they've been specifically briefed on it. This could just be some. Yeah, they might be thinking this is just some.
They knew who he was.
They might think
the
it's just hey, can I finish the sentence?
Forward and they're all drunk.
Yeah, they might just be thinking he's like a diplomat who showed up or something. That's true. It's like, hey,
that's a good point.
We're all friendly
welcome.
here.
Yeah, that's good. Let's make him feel welcome. Yeah, that's a good point.
But that does not negate what I said of you don't crowd the guy who seems confused and frustrated and upset.
Yeah. Well, and just to go back to your point, Jimmy, you made about the holodeck, him getting out of there easily. Relying on the holodeck is always a bad idea. At no point should that be your number one option. Unless it
wasn't their number one option. It was the backup because Picard was being unreasonable.
That's right.
Yep.
Crusher can't wipe his memory. That's convenient.
Yeah, I wrote down.
Well, it's not very convenient at all.
What? You're sorry you can't wipe a person's memory? What are you apologizing for? What? You're the good guys? What is going on here? I know they did it in Men in Black. They ripped us off 5 years or just a few years later after this, 4 or 5 years later.
It is still like a common spaceship sci-fi prime directive trope of like, well, if we can just excise this dangerous part, we can put it back like nothing happened.
Revenge of the Sith. Wipe out their memories. What? It's played for a joke that they're going to wipe out C-3PO and R2-D2, or I think they only end up wiping out C-3PO's memory, but which again is also retconning too, but whatever.
Right.
Still,
forget.
Like, yeah.
One of those.
Yeah.
They needed a Vulcan in there.
Requiem for Methuselah. We got there. Islands of Terror coming up soon.
Troy comes forward and introduces herself as Nikolai's friend. Sorry. Don't believe Troy is going to lie to him at that point. I think she'll say comforting things, but we don't see Troy as a liar, and that is an outright lie.
Not really.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Oh, how so? Is a friend like a friend of her? This is that as a point
He's
of
a
reference.
brother of her friend. They're not friends.
I just think that's
Everyone
another one of
knows
the. I think it's another one of the gymnastics things done in this episode of like we're gonna do whatever we can to get to.
Well, it just seems ridiculous.
You know what? And this is, and I'm jumping ahead now, and I'm sorry, guys, but the fact that Lauren is that our guy? Is that our guy that's in 10-4? Lauren, is that his name? Looking right at him. The fact that he's the most tragic part of this story, I think, is, and it's the B story of it is. I think that's just another injustice.
I think the redemptive part of this episode was packed at the end. It's like it's not even just we want to get this guest star and have him do something meaty. It was more like somebody had this idea for something, something to do with the prime directive that would result in this kind of dilemma for a character. Let's handle it in this way. And even I liked the idea of what they were trying to do with the holodeck. Although, first of all, the conflicts were obviously a little bit too contrived. Like the chances of those kinds of things going wrong. There's a little, this thing is just malfunctioning all over the place. We can't do anything about that. And maybe a good explanation for why it's being overtaxed. I don't know if they did that. A storm or something, or just it's too complicated.
Yeah, well, I wrote down that I was like, man, that's one hell of a holodeck program, and it makes sense that at some point Jordy's like, oh crap, I missed that little part, and conveniently that's where our boy went.
Yeah,
and walked right out the door or whatever. But yeah,
that aside though, I think that was one of those. How sometimes we actually kind of like the prime directive episodes where they focus on something new about it. If they get into a good debate about or a dilemma about what to do, and the problem was they just kind of front loaded all the cheap kind of let's get to here from here to here, and kind of hand wave when they really wanted to get to this point of we can finally see what is focus on an alien who's affected by this in some way.
Yep.
I almost felt like we've seen it before because we did something like that with and others. Orville, for one thing, I think they had something like that. A couple things. But I like the best scene there was suddenly Picard showing up as Picard talking to this kid. And he kind of knew what the answers needed to be, but he was very calmly not nudging him necessarily or even leading him, but just presenting him here. You're a reasonable person. Here are the questions someone would consider in this point. Like, I'm going to rely on you to get there yourself. So I don't have to try to, because you show up, you're being taken captive, or it feels that way. They needed to go, we're letting you do whatever you want. We're not coercing you, so he can just relax and get there himself and convince himself it was his idea, And it was really, really elegantly done. But they ate a lot of time. It was almost, now that I'm thinking about it, it's almost like a two separate episodes or two separate episodes worth of gimmicks.
Yeah.
That you could have done there. I liked the idea, like the creative problem solving with the holodeck, but they hand waved into it and hand waved out of it. And I liked the idea of focusing on the impact of someone with, a young person with those kinds of responsibilities in that dilemma. But just, and then, I think I even might have tuned out for the resolution of Nikolai, Worf's brother, just, casually fathering a child with someone. That was such a fun reveal with Worf.
Fun.
When she puts Worf's hand on her belly, and he's kind of like this first opportunity, kind of like pulling it away, just repulsed.
What I wrote was Uncle. Now that's what I call violating the prime directive. I mean, he went all the way, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
And again, I will fault no one for going all the way with Penny Gerald Johnson.
That's Lauren's best scene with her in Star Trek.
That's amazing. I don't really seen her. What decades after that? Probably the first time I saw her was in 24. So that I didn't even quite get the. I wasn't sure that was her.
Deep Space Nine.
Forgot.
So I think she's in
15 episodes with Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, that's a good reason to say with the Balerans. There's no other good reason.
He tried to work it in there, but it's like, nope. I'm gonna just hang out here for a while. You guys go ahead. Oops, I can't come with you. I guess I'm stuck here. Yeah.
Fast forward 3 years later, he's like, "Can you guys come get me?"
Yeah.
Or
we divorced.
Actually, which might actually make more sense. Penny Johnson figures out and like, can you guys come get him?
So, yeah, while he's our buddy Vorin is in the Enterprise D, it's like, how do you explain his absence? I mean, eventually they're like, yeah, he's lost. We lost him. But there wasn't a search for him, or if there was, we didn't see it. And that felt a little bit weird. But at the same time, It's like, it would be really weird to try to integrate him back in. And that's what I kept thinking. But I guess that they already decided to try to talk him out of it, even though they made it seem like it was his decision.
I mean, if they'd read the logs and they found the tomorrow is yesterday experience, they could have slingshotted past the sun and dropped him right back there. They could have dropped him all back there. And they would have never.
That's a great call. Great call.
I mean, while we're talking about great episodes of Trek,
like this classic that we're scoring has hung the moon and wrung tears. Yeah, right. Hung the moon, wrung the tears. I almost got something catchy.
Ding, ding.
We can start working the t-shirts at some point, I think.
I like this. Let's get some merch. IBD.com/merch.
One of my nitpicky aspects about this episode was they talked about how would you explain the star shifting position? And I'm like, well, we're going to walk. I'm pretty sure they're only walking for like 3 days. So how are you going to explain completely different stars in 3 days? If I walk 3 days all day and all night right now, the stars aren't going to shift like at all. So
magic.
Is Geordi
miracles, omens.
So you couldn't have Geordi slowly changing the stars to match the course because they didn't know what the destination was when they started. So it would have to be very quick that he changes the stars at the end. It just doesn't fully make sense.
Well, and our Fashionate So friends, my favorite Tumblr account for TNG, they mentioned, they're like, where are these people? They don't have warp drive, we know that, but are they Dark Ages, they were trying to figure out through the costuming, and they're like, we don't really know where these people are.
I think the scrolls were supposed to be an indication.
They have paper.
Yeah, and I mean the fact that they were using that for record keeping purposes, and the explanations they seem to accept, or the way that that Nikolai chose to phrase things as they were going along, seemed to indicate mostly religious sort of.
I have another alternate episode now, which is that our boy Lawrence survives, and he's more like Dave Bowman from 2001. Because he gets all this new information, and he becomes he's the next wave. And whether they send him back to the Blarins or wherever or on Jakatu, whatever they. And why was Crusher involved with helping find the next planet along with Data, or was she just hanging out to be like, I want to see this through to the end? And I just thought that was weird. They're like, well, the two of us gonna hang out, figure out the good planet for them.
Well, I mean, she might have some idea of biological matches, and she did seem to be. Well, I remember just they cut to her expression a few times in that boardroom meeting, sort of being the voice of we should be saving these people at all costs.
Yes, she's the one who's like, what are we talking about here? We can save 40 people, or we can save, or whatever many it was. Yeah. Or we can save none. We should save as many as we can. What kind of prime directive is that?
Another example, or I guess it reminded me of how forced Picard's character was. That kind of regression. Who'd you say? I don't know if you already talked about the writing and so forth, and the experience level of the.
Yep.
Whatever, and did it make sense to you? I don't know. It seemed like
writing was bad.
Yeah. It was a lot of gymnastics to try and get to a couple things, and I just question this, or at least a little bit. But the Crusher Data, they get in the conversation, which I think is, again, there are some really good moments and lines in this episode, and obviously great actors. But Crusher and Data, and essentially they both say the same thing in different words, and not these words, but essentially they say, nothing in life is guaranteed. So, because they're like, well, if we do this might happen. If we do this might happen. And they're both like, well, yeah, but who knows what we don't know. Nothing is guaranteed. So, and I guess this shows even more poorly on Picard of like, dude, just because we do we do A and B doesn't mean C's happening. It means it could be J or L. And, as I often like to say, and as our good friend Mr. Spock said, I like to, or actually Kirk Rathakan, I like to believe there are always possibilities. So,
my notes.
Or as Spock would say, life comes at you fast. You gotta start.
Play
I
harder.
don't know. Was it? I can't. It's either what is it, the
Vincent
insurance-
Bueller would say.
Yeah, Bueller or the insurance company commercial. I can't remember which.
Nationwide.
Bueller. So at this point in my notes, we're up to her revelation that she's pregnant. We want to know how he plans to explain the look of the child, because the child's going to be half human, half their race. So are they just going to think the child's deformed? Is that
He could alter it. I mean, however he was altering himself. I mean, he could just kind of sneak over and
he doesn't
kind of.
have a sick bay to do it for him, and he's not going to.
Yeah, Keith, that goes to one of my notes, which is how easy are these surgical alterations? Because they all treat it very glibly, like just go get yourself changed into what these people look like. Which on the Enterprise incident, when Kirk's a rum, and then everyone's like, "Oh my God, how did this happen? This is amazing." On this episode, like, yeah, just go on down. Which to me also means everyone on that ship should look phenomenal. That's another alternate episode, which is like, you know what? I'm feeling my age a little bit. I'm gonna go get these crow's feet taken care of. Are you sure you have time? Yeah, I got 20 minutes before I got to be on duty. So,
Well, that is one thing I'd forgotten. It seemed odd they were flipping those surgeries around left and right, like the his brother. Why did they even bother to make him look completely human?
yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, just for a meeting. Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And are we to assume that he was doing that himself in his duck blind or something?
I assumed he had that happen before he went on the mission. It just isn't that way.
Yeah.
So the historian Voren kills himself.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's such a great segue. I'm sorry. It's just nice and sensitive. Like what?
I wish we'd spent more time in the episode with him, what he was dealing with. We got a scene or two, and those were great. But honestly, this episode did not know where its important beats were. Yeah. And it should have spent more time with this guy.
Yeah, because like I said, I still felt touched by his death, but I would have liked, and we got a little bit into it, and it doesn't redeem Picard that, oh, I feel bad that this happened. It's like, yeah, you should jack off.
Could have been
He
helped.
would have died anyway. And it's like, yeah, if you left him on the planet, not a good, that's not an excuse to make you feel better.
No. And yeah, I would have liked to got more into his head and what he was going through. Cause it ends up, like I said, I did feel a little bit moved by it, but I also felt like, oh, this was convenient. And I wish I didn't see it coming. So to that point, it's like, oh, wow, crap. But yeah.
Well, that's one of the moments where you need they need like a Prime Directive theme, like the Quagmire theme they would have every now and then in Family Guy. So it's like, like one of those. That's the Prime Directive.
What else but the Prime Directive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the Prime Directive way.
They're in the holodeck and they've reached the destination. Things are falling apart, and they call a Forge and say, "Make a Miles O'Brien the Storyteller special. Let's make a storm in the holodeck."
Yes,
to distract them.
Rick Storm.
I guess that's enough of a distraction that nobody knows they're beaming, which does not make sense to me.
No, and they called it a ritual suicide. So I guess is that like
Harry Carey?
Thank you. Yes, that's where I was going. I was going to say kimchi, but that's just.
I'm Harry Carey.
Or it might have been Howard Cosell. I'm not sure who I'm thinking of.
No, you're right.
Oh, Jim beat me to it. I mean, to at least get. I wanted to completely out of nowhere. Just that.
I guess I'm just doing Will Ferrell.
Hey Norm.
Look at that kid in the sombrero. Yeah.
After all this, Nikolai is allowed to stay with them?
Yeah. Well, and then Worf
actually would arrest him, right?
He and Worf reconcile, and I just wrote down, brothers got a home.
And as we talked about at the beginning, Stephen, it was totally unearned.
It's not earned.
But it still felt moving.
Yes.
And taking the personal responsibility.
Yep.
The hug. Worf saying, like, I'm going to explain to the parents. I'll just tell them that he's happy. Like, oh, that was so affecting. And yet there were a few things in that scene that didn't make sense. Like, why is Nikolai going to become the Chronicler now? And why is he letting Worf just walk away with a Chronicle? Like, Worf could replicate that and keep a copy, but Worf just walks away with an important history. Nikolai's, take it, no problem. It's like, oh.
All right. My thought on that, and this is something that I must have completely tuned out on, by the way. Just from what you're describing, it makes sense that what else are they going to do with Nikolai? What we've seen in the past for the series is in this utopian future, they don't really seem to believe in punishment for its own sake. It's like, what would be the point of like locking him up in jail somewhere if he's going to just not reconcile, but essentially exile himself with these people? That's it. I mean, he's made his decision. He's effectively becoming a citizen in ways, almost like defecting to this. There you go. What he can't really do much more damage. And as far as the Chronicles are concerned, there might have been some hinky things that wanted to let's just wipe that one clean, and I'll come up with a way to fix that. So Worf, just take this away, so we don't have to like dispose of it. And in a way, he's like taking away the evidence that might. So
he could write a false chronicle any way he wants, and then cover up his crime. I guess that makes sense. I didn't think.
Well, no, I mean, if Nikolai's taking over, that's the whole point. He needs to kind of keep control of whatever narrative is going to be happening going forward. And
okay, that makes sense. Yeah. You've sold me on that one. That part of it, Keith.
Yeah, not only that, but he's like the whole reason why the kid got into trouble is because it was his job to keep looking into things, asking those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
So
I got no more notes. I'm done.
I have two. No, I have one more. They say at one. Worf says this to Nikolai, which Worf might be my most annoying character, but he isn't. But he's pretty annoying too to me. Everywhere you go, you create chaos. He says it like it's a bad thing. Hey, no, I say creating chaos is a good thing.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily created because it's guaranteed anyway.
This is true. Well, I don't know if it guarantees it, but to hear Worf say it, he does. It is guaranteed when he's around. So that is my laugh note.
Keith, anything else about this episode?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
Okay, we'll give you a few minutes to talk about Deep Space Nine in a minute. Let's rank this episode.
It's right at the top.
No. Who was your annoyance this week?
Picard.
Yeah, I hate to say it. I mean, I probably might have gone Nikolai for some of the antics, but it was one of those cases of the just not being written correctly at the beginning.
I was gonna say Nikolai, but you're right. It's Picard, so we'll just do Picard across the board. Who are you having a drink with? I mean, Warm, obviously.
That was my first thought.
This will surprise nobody that's listeners to this podcast. Penny Johnson, Gerald. Yeah.
Keith.
Probably Worf.
Okay, so we'll go with Worf. Ranking the episode.
Penny Johnson is somebody. So when Julie Louis-Dreyfus, who is my quote unquote celebrity girlfriend, had her bout with cancer, I invited her to the F Cancer Cabaret, and she didn't show, obviously, but
she didn't.
But my second ex-wife,
not that we know of.
She was like, "You could not handle that," and I was like, "You're right. If she walked in, I would just burst into tears." No. But Penny Johnson, I think I would have a similar reaction. So, but I'm still willing to try it.
She married Graylin Gerald in 1982, so I guess she was already Penny Johnson Gerald.
Oh wow!
They've been married for 40 years. I don't think
and JLD's been married to her husband for 40 some years, and they dated for a couple years before that. So again, I think I'm picking good celebrity girlfriends that are good people, and their husbands.
The 40-year itch is coming up any second.
Ranking the episode, I don't even know where to start with this one.
It's obviously.
Let's go. I mean, this has been such a weak episode, a weak season anyway. Let's start with Inheritance.
Amazingly, Jimmy, if you have one superpower, and you have many, but this is one of them, is figuring out where to start this process. Yeah,
I think I'm pretty good at it. I feel pretty good.
It's very good. Yeah, this is a very good spot.
I'd put this one under.
Ooh,
yeah, I guess so.
I got a lot more out of the data stuff, honestly.
I wouldn't say a lot, but yeah.
No, I would say I think substantially more thought went into the backstory and what they were doing with it, rather than this is like, by the way, Warp had this Boster brother who didn't need to come up, and he's kind of a troublemaker. That's all you need to know. Let's go.
That one does a lot of gymnastics too, but not nearly as many as this. This one had to be Nadia Comaneci, and now I'm really dating myself, but that one was more Simone Biles?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So below that is the set part 2, which I hated. So I'm definitely going to say above.
Yeah.
Yep. There we go. Nice and easy.
Before we say what we're doing next week, Keith, you want to talk about last week, Deep Space Nine, the alternate? Any thoughts?
Oh, let's see. There were some, I don't know. I felt like I was picking up on some things that you might have been hinting at some point or another. Or rather, you would say a phrase every now and then or kind of key in on something. This is probably what informed you about some of Odo's background, things we hadn't gotten to here. the perspective from the doctor who essentially raised him and discovered him. It's I think the summary of what occurred to me toward the end of that is it was almost like a good allegory for latent trauma responses, perhaps. Just some things that Odo hadn't had a chance to explore. This guy's presence was able to do that. And they showed both the good and the bad parts about reconnecting with those kinds of figures from your past. There was just, Renee Auberjonois is just fantastic at getting some of those things across occasionally. The subtlety of not wanting to, or maybe not even being able to admit the kind of connection that he needed as they were going along. And we saw that little reaction when he was starting to get approval midway through. And it seemed like, maybe this is going to be an enriching and healthy thing for him. And perhaps, debatably, it probably was in the long run, but some of that healing is violent too. We saw those eruptions. I'm not sure what I thought about the mystery itself and how they got there. I felt like there were enough red herrings to keep it from jumping out at me right away. I can't remember what I thought at first, but I think
we liked the episode. We rated it relatively high.
I think the swerve disappointed me a little bit as far as, well, but it wasn't an intentional swerve. It is we're still planting seeds about the Dominion thing as we go along, which I do like that. And they weren't, it was just enough there. I mean, the problem is
spoiling that Odo's people are connected to the Dominion, but okay.
Yeah.
We didn't think it hung that thing that's behind you for the Patreon viewers.
But we liked it. We ranked it 4 out of 12.
Yeah. It's, it just kept, I think I'm getting impatient simply because I know more than I would have wanted to know. And it's probably going to be quite a ways off too, isn't it? That it's just
end of the season. End of the season.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're getting there. We're getting relatively close. Who was your shady character in the alternate?
Doctor.
Laura.
Yeah, my thought was he had set this up to to lure him back, and because it was really. Yeah,
I opined that I don't think it was a setup so much as he was looking for an excuse to spend time with Odo again because he missed him.
Yeah.
Well, not just that, but I think he would seem to be trying to leverage him to just leave the station entirely. Let's just go back home and forget this place. You've been here long enough.
I never got that impression. I think he wanted to spend some time with Odo, and while he would have liked Odo to come back to Bajor, I don't think he ever seriously tried to get him to go back. I think he was proud of what he'd done and accomplished and built and just wanted to be part of his life. Well,
you don't remember the climax, the whole bit where Odo's starting to have the meltdown because he's essentially trying to plant these, to insist that he can't trust anybody on the station other than him. And they started having that argument. And, you're so ungrateful and it's implying that he's not safe to stay there. You should come with me. That kind of is like, that was the whole.
But I think the meltdown was kind of an isolated incident. I don't take that as like his whole mission for the whole episode. I think that was just like, there's really bad things happening. Let me protect you.
Perhaps.
Who is your annoyance?
I
mean, obviously Bashir for being creepy on Dax, but.
It wasn't. Anyway, I think it's probably still the doctor.
That was Steven's annoyance and shady as well. Who are you having a drink with?
Probably Odo if he drank, but
That's unanimous. We ranked it below the Siege, which was the end of the 3-part opening of the season, but above Cardassians, the adopted Cardassian kid.
Ooh, let's see. That's pretty comparable, I guess. I mean, it's really hard to say one way or the other which one of those, because there were just some things to be annoyed by. I guess the Odo backstory would balance out the meat of that dilemma with the self-hating Cardassian. Yeah, I don't know.
We were both pretty solid about being above Cardassian. We were both kind of wavering on should it be below or above the Siege.
Yeah.
Ended up below. Yeah. Anyway, next week we stay on The Next Generation, or Sub Rosa. Dr. Crusher meets the man in her dead grandmother's life when she tries to put her affairs in order, whom one of the local people warned her to stay away from by not lighting a candle that has been lit for generations. So it is a Crusher episode, which we've come to believe are bad episodes. And without giving anything away, because I have not seen this episode, this is widely considered the worst episode of The Next Generation.
Wow.
I can't wait. Actually,
those are Gray for me is like the bottom.
Oh, for sure.
But I don't know. Sub Rosa's pretty bad. I mean, I guess all I know about it is they say this is the one where she has sex with the candle ghost.
Why'd you say that?
That
hopefully I'll forget.
Seems like it couldn't be that bad, but it sounds like it is.
Yeah. Anyway,
it's a Meg episode, everybody. Here's the remote. We won't blame you.
We are going to
No,
be
I
in the
mean-
Scottish Highlands. Apparently, that's where Crusher's from. The Scottish Highlands.
Ah,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, the accent.
Good lord.
Another Highlander connection. I think.
Until then, live long.
In the Matrix, or I guess maybe a Matrix? Matrices? And
And there can be only one.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's got the time?